let's take a moment and take a trip down memory lane. We're going to travel back in time to the year 2015, when the world was a much simpler place. It was a much simpler time. Back in old 2015, I used some pine that was reclaimed from some pallets to build a shoe rack for my daughter. Over the years, this shoe rack has seen a lot of use and it's served its purpose well. But now, it's time for this shoe rack to stop living in the past and come join us in the present. And this is that very same shoe rack that I built in that YouTube video way back in 2015, nearly 10 years ago. It's kind of hard to believe. That video is still on my channel. There's a link in the video description. The main reason for this video today is because I want to take this shoe rack and repurpose it for something different inside our home. But before I do that, I want to give this thing a bit of a facelift. I never was really a fan of the color you get when you put a finish on pine. I just don't like that yellow look. So in this video, we're going to change that around. This is something I've been wanting to try for a little while. I'm Jeff. You're watching Home Built Workshop. In a different project, not this one that I did earlier this year, where I built a little rolling shelf, kind of a cart thing, using some stair treads and some pipe fittings for the uprights. I used this particular product for the finish. This is a product made by Behr, not sponsored. This is a water-based stain and poly. This is the satin finish, and the color is honey. Honey is always a color that I just like the color of. But I used this as the finish on that rolling shelf cart storage thing. Link in the description. You can check out this one as well as that rolling cart. On the instructions, there's two specific sets of instructions. One is for unfinished wood, and that's the steps that I used on the rolling cart. But also there's steps for applying this particular product over a piece that's already been finished. As soon as I saw that, I immediately had this as well as possibly a couple of other projects in mind that I might try to use this product over the existing finish. When I built this shoe shelf so many years ago, I used a Danish oil, and really I think that's what gave it this yellow color. But it's had 10 years to cure. I'm not worried about that it's not cured fully. It's plenty of time. So what I want to do in this video is use this particular product, follow the instructions to apply it on this piece, and see how it works over an existing finish. See if we can give this thing a facelift, make it look not so yellow. We'll just try it out. If it works great, then I've got another piece or two that I might try the same thing on. But let's see how this works. According to the instructions, all we need to do to prepare the piece is to sand it with some 400 grit. Wow, that's kind of crazy. It's been 10 years, and as I'm sanding this, I can still smell a little bit of that pine coming through. Huh, I would have thought that had been gone long ago. We'll just clean off all the dust, and I think we're ready to start applying this finish. See how this works. Stir well before using. Since this is a water-based product, it does have kind of a milky or maybe a bluish tint to it when it's in the can. But based on my limited experience with this, once it dries, that goes away. I've not noticed any weird tint or anything on the piece after that finish is dried. I'm going to use a brush to apply it. I'm going to start on the inside. That way, if instantly right away I can tell this is going completely wrong, I can stop and it won't really affect anything. I think it's going to go fine though. Well, that looks a little weird at the moment. It doesn't seem to have covered like I expected. I don't know what I expected, but I'm going to let this dry, and the instructions say that to apply 2 to 3 coats. So before I do the whole thing and don't like the look, I'm gonna let this underside dry and then apply the second, possibly the third coat, and see what it's looking like before we move on. This might take a little while then. Once our little test area has dried, I lightly sanded it with 400, like the instructions say, applied a second coat. I'm not super crazy about how it looks. The color looks perfectly fine to me, but there's a lot of visible brush marks. Hopefully you can see on there, there's a lot of brush marks. It did not lay down flat. I'm not really sure why. I don't know if that's the quality of the brush that I used, but I just am not happy with the way that looks. I'm totally fine with the color. I have no problem with that, but having so many visible brush marks, I don't want that to be what the top of this piece or even the sides look like, so I have to try something different. I ended up trying a regular old foam brush on a little scrap piece of wood. We actually did this live in one of my weekly lives that I do every Wednesday, 9 a.m. Mountain Time. If you want to join in, it's a great time hanging out, talking shop projects, brainstorming, just having a good time hanging out with each other. Love to have you if you've never been in one of the lives. Aside from that, we did this live. Just a little sample test piece, and actually the foam brush laid down the finish a lot neater than even a regular paintbrush did. Again, not sure if it's the quality of the brush that I had, but I think we're going to use a foam brush to apply this to the rest of this piece. And if the finished piece turns out like this sample does, I'd be totally cool with that. Hardly any brush marks, if any at all. Laid down nice, looks fine. So that's what we're going to try next. And I can already tell it just lays down better with a foam brush. That's going to work so much better, I think. I think that's going to be the way to go. It might take an extra coat to get the coverage, but I'm okay with that. It's definitely going to take a couple of coats. Ken says 2, possibly 3. I could see that. It is covering, and it looks a lot better than when applied with a brush, which I'm happy about. After that first coat with the foam brush is dried, I can tell that's actually going to work, and I feel that it looks a little bit better than the finish I was getting off of the regular paintbrush. However, there's one question that I just got to answer, and that is, can you spray this stuff with a spray gun? I can find no information online about spraying it. The only thing I see is it says do not thin. So I'm going to load some of this up in a spray gun. We're going to see if we can spray this. I just got to know. Curiosity killed the cat. I don't know what that necessarily means, but I got to answer this question just to settle my mind. I don't see why this doesn't work. I'm going to call that a success. The brush, not very great because of all the brush marks. The foam brush, in my opinion, was a little bit better. But overall, the easiest, spray gun. But yet the instructions don't say anything about spraying. So I guess we just proved that you can dump it right out of the can into a spray gun and it works fine. Probably the only thing I can see, and some of that may be just due to the light, is a little bit of striping where I had sprayed. Maybe I didn't quite move in an even speed, so that way I got a little bit more of the pigment in one area versus the other. But overall, I'm not too worried about that for this particular piece. Overall, I would say this turned out great. Just a quick little facelift for a piece I made almost 10 years ago. Now it's going to be put back to work in our home in a different area for a little bit of a different purpose, but still holding up well. And we found out that a spray gun works for this particular finish. So I would say, don't be afraid to experiment, especially when it comes to finishing or, well, really anything for that matter. If there's a particular thing that you want to try, like the manufacturer of this doesn't say anything about spraying it, but yet in my mind, I didn't see any reason why that wouldn't work. And it turns out it's almost better than the other methods, although the foam brush wasn't bad. Don't be afraid to think outside the box, have a little bit of fun, experiment. If we never experimented with things, how would we figure out new techniques and new methods for doing things? You gotta just try stuff out. And in this case, things turned out just fine. Will things always go okay when you experiment? Well, no. No, they won't. Sometimes we ruin some parts, we ruin some pieces. And there's also lessons to be learned there. So again, don't be afraid to experiment. Take a little chance, figure some new things out. That's how we learn and grow. Hope you enjoyed this little facelift project. Thanks a lot for watching. Now get out in your shops and go experiment. Try some new things. Have fun, be safe, and we'll see you next time. It worked.